Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We're committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, decisions, and situations in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact our freedoms.
Please become a monthly supporter of the State of Freedom at freedomstate.us as we continue to expand the voice of liberty across Louisiana and beyond. I went to Red Zeppelin yesterday with my second oldest son, Eli, and I got this large veggie pizza, which is the best in Baton Rouge. Red Zeppelin is the best kept secret, but because of us, it's really not a secret anymore. Anybody who has not been to Red Zeppelin on Perkins Road in Baton Rouge, you're truly missing out. The best environment, the best service, and the best pizza in the state of Louisiana. Go to Red Zeppelin today. Tell them the State of Freedom sent you.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the State of Freedom, where we are grounded in faith in the Constitution, and we are committed to giving voice to the truth, living with courage, and taking action. It is Wednesday, February 5th. It's 10 a.m. Central, and I'm Danielle Walker. I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, the founder and watchdog of Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, Chris Alexander. Welcome back, Chris.
Well, thank you, Danielle.
Good to be back in the saddle.
We made it back out of the den of vipers in one piece.
That's a good thing. And we are coming to you live on Voice of the People, USA TV and radio network on Rumble, YouTube, X, and Facebook. You can always catch us later on our podcast, our audio-only podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Well, happy Wednesday to everybody. Happy Warrior Wednesday to everybody. If you are new to the show, Warrior Wednesday is a day where subscribers drive the conversation in the chat. So if you are not yet a subscriber, please support us at join.freedomstate.us, or you can just find it on freedomstate.us. There's a join button there. Today, Chris and I have a couple things to cover. The Election System Commission meeting yesterday, where Chris and a number of other patriots testified, and our very initial thoughts about some of the legislation that has been pre-filed for the legislative session that kicks off on Monday. Well, before we get into it, let's read the scripture of the day so we can keep our wits about us.
Do we need it? We need it today, huh?
Yeah, we need it every day. All right. Today's is 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 13 and 14. And it says, "But the evil men and sorcerers will progress from bad to worse, deceived and deceiving as they lead people further from the truth. Yet you must continue to advance in strength with the truth wrapped around your heart, being assured by God that He's the one who has truly taught you all these things." And yesterday, in reflecting on the opening scripture, I talked about the truth being something that resonates inside of us. And I feel like the Lord wants to say more to us on that topic today. In John 14:6, Jesus said, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life." And when we come into the family of God through the gifts of repentance and faith, Holy Spirit comes to live inside of us. Before his crucifixion, Jesus explained to his disciples in John 16:13 that after he went to heaven, he would be sending Holy Spirit who would lead us into all truth. I say this to say that if we are in Christ, we have full access to the one who will lead us into all truth. We may not get all the answers or be able to fully understand all that's going on in the world. He hasn't made us omniscient, but we can rely on Holy Spirit to guide us and give us discernment about the truth and lies with regard to those things that are important to inform our ability to make decisions and move forward. So we don't need to fear being deceived. We just need to seek the Lord and move as Holy Spirit leads us forward in truth, because He is calling us in the same way He called Timothy to advance in strength.
And boy, do we need it, huh, Danielle? Because there is deception all around us.
Yeah.
And not only do we have to be on guard against the deception of others, whether it's individual deception or institutional deception, we have to be on guard that we ourselves are not being dishonest, that we ourselves are embracing the full truth. You know, so often, Danielle, virtue and quote unquote prudence are very poor substitutes for courage. I think that people often use propriety and prudence and virtue sort of as a cloak for cowardice. In other words, they don't want to do certain things because they don't want to offend, or they don't want to
Yeah.
be um, too. They don't want to shake the apple cart. They don't want to be too nonconformist, and therefore they come up with different rationalizations, or different excuses for inaction. And we have to be careful about that. We certainly want to approach things in a way that is motivated by love, but we definitely never want to use any convenient rationalization as an excuse not to act.
Yeah.
And action requires courage. And I admire greatly the people who appeared at the Capitol yesterday. It was amazing to me, Danielle. This meeting was called. We really didn't know what this election meeting was about. There's this huge concern in the state about these electronic voting machines, and they had this meeting yesterday, the Voting Systems Commission yesterday. We didn't really know what it was about. All it said was presentation. Well, what does that mean? But there was a part that said you could have public comment. So the Secretary of State was there, and the rest of the Voting System Commission, and quite a large group of Louisiana patriots showed up, and everybody testified on one facet or another about the catastrophic vulnerabilities of these electronic voting machines that our Secretary of State seems determined to invest a bunch of our money in. It was a beautiful, beautiful day. And if there's one thing that the Secretary of State no longer can claim, it's plausible deniability.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you, Chris. I was able to catch some of the most of the testimony, or at least a good bit of the testimony after the show with William Most yesterday wrapped up. And one thing that really struck me is I feel like the Patriots there have really built a case for malfeasance in office. It should Nancy Landry choose to move forward, should the Voting System Commission choose to move forward, there's absolutely no way they can say that they were not warned. And one thing that really struck me was that in all of the testimony that I saw, it seemed to me the Secretary of State sat up there. She was very strict about her 3-minute limitation on comments per person. And she showed no interest, asked no questions, and showed zero moral or intellectual curiosity about what it was that the people were claiming. And to me, it seemed like she couldn't get out of there fast enough. This was a necessary evil, a necessary pain for her on the way to getting the voting machines. That's the way that I perceived the way she conducted that meeting yesterday, Chris. And we always say we're not here to judge motives, but that's the way it looked.
Yeah, very much so. It seemed very perfunctory, not one question. And Danielle, and I didn't raise this yesterday, and I probably should have. We've been going down to the legislature now for 4 or 5 years, since 2021 or 2022, I think, when Sharon Hewitt's bill passed, this new that overhauled our the process of securing a voting system in Louisiana. And not and I've been to committee meeting after committee meeting where the Secretary of State has been present, and I have not seen one substantive question from one committee member from one legislature on the vulnerabilities of electronic voting. Not one question. She's never been scrutinized, she's never been questioned, not one single question. And that, to me, when the legislature has a constitutional duty to exercise vigorous oversight when it comes to the spending of our money and the securing of our elections, it's their responsibility. They are a co equal branch of government, and
Yeah.
their primary responsibility is to scrutinize with an eagle eye every action of the executive branch that affects Louisiana citizens. And I've not seen any legislative oversight, any significant oversight over this process at all. I think that is an absolute disgrace. And that is a big part of the reason why we're in the situation that we are in. because the legislature is not exercising its proper constitutional oversight over Nancy Landry. That's the problem. We are having to exercise the oversight. Louisiana patriots are having to exercise the oversight that they should be doing. And it's our money, it's our votes, it's the security of our election system. And for it to exist the way that it exists now, I think is an absolute disgrace. And I did not make that point yesterday, but can you imagine? Can you imagine in the day of 100 years ago, in the state of Louisiana or even in the country, when you're talking about this massive investment of money in a new voting system that's supposed to secure our vote?
Yeah.
Okay. And the legislature does not ask one single question about the vulnerabilities of what she is proposing. Not one question.
And here's a perspective, Chris. There have been other members of the executive branch in Louisiana that have testified before the legislature, right? I've seen Secretary Fleming testify. I've seen, I believe, Commissioner Tim Temple testify. They seem to be ones that get some kind of rigorous questioning. They seem to be ones who are at least asked questions.
Yeah, right. The rhinos and the Democrats don't mind asking questions of the executive branch when it comes to making gold and silver transactional currency in Louisiana, which 9 out of 10 Louisiana citizens want in order to defray on some level the steadily diminishing value of the dollar, to have a steady backup to the fiat dollar. It was a very good bill that Ray Cruz brought. You would have thought that he was, and Secretary Fleming was there because he supported the legislation. You would have thought that they were on a firing line in there. So
Yeah.
the legislature does not have any problem exercising oversight on issues that Louisiana citizens, in order to kill issues and bills that Louisiana citizens really want and really desire. But when it comes to things that are of true concern to Louisiana citizens, like this carbon capture garbage and our election system, there's no oversight whatsoever.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I think that is not the way it's supposed to be.
no, it's not the way it's supposed to be. But let's get back to this voting system commission hearing yesterday. So you said the purpose of this commission meeting, what was the stated purpose?
The stated purpose, all it said was presentation. It did state in the notice that they're going to, elect, the chairman, introduce the new members, and then it's just said presentation and then public comment. No clue, no idea what the presentation was supposed to be about. But since there was a notice that the public could make comments, could be there and testify, a lot of Louisiana patriots showed up and went on the record, once again registering our concerns about what her plans are regarding this electronic computer-based voting system. And the thing that amazed me about it, Danielle, on the good side, was that every facet of this issue was covered by one patriot or another in their testimony. All
That's
of it.
so cool.
Christy Hike reiterated the Trump administration's position on this issue, the cybersecurity experts, and how they're all ringing the alarm about how we don't need computer-based voting. It's dangerous. It's not secure. We had Dr. Randy Russ talking about President Trump's EO addressing the critical infrastructure issues associated with this. We had Jenny Seal even mentioned Tina Peters. I thought
That's
that
awesome.
was really, really interesting.
Yeah.
We had, I believe it might have been Jackie Hassel. I know there was some testimony about a letter that Nancy Landry was waving in front of a committee last session, which purported to be an endorsement from the Trump administration for her investment in these electronic voting machines, which turned out that that's not at all what the letter said. And we're not even certain where the letter came from.
It wasn't Jackie. It was a woman named Cecile Richards.
Okay, Cecile Richards. And so she brought that up.
And I have that if you want me to play it, Chris.
Yeah, I'd like to play this because this was a big issue and still has not been adequately addressed by the Secretary of State. She purported to represent in front of a committee that she had a letter from the Trump administration endorsing her plans. But the letter had nothing to do with electronic voting machines. And again, the source and the legitimacy of the letter are still in question. And that was brought up before directly. And by the way, Nancy Landry was sitting front and center. She was elected the chairperson of the Voting System Commission yesterday. So again, there's no plausible deniability anymore. But I thought it was interesting that the lady that you're talking about in the clip we're about to play brought up that letter.
Yeah, and thanks to Katie for clipping it. I'll roll this, Chris, and then I want to talk about the commissioners as well when we get back.
Cecile Richards. And the Secretary of State has repeatedly stated in speeches and on record that the current administration in Washington has not only told her to go ahead with the purchase of new voting machines in Louisiana, but to do it quickly. However, in a Senate and Government Affairs Committee hearing on May 8th, 2025, when Senate Bill 226 was being heard in Senate Judiciary A, when asked if she had any evidence of that directive, she entered into the permanent record a letter which this commission has been given copies of. However, that letter, instead of confirming what the Secretary stated, has only raised more questions about that claim. It's problematic in that there's no letterhead, there's no signature, there's no name or title, and it does not mention voting machines. It is a Word document. After making our own inquiries with the administration, we have found out that the letter was given her from a person who works for Stephen Miller in the Public Policy Office and was not intended to speak to the procurement of new voting machines in Louisiana. And while it advocates for the general goal of election security and proper procedures, it says nothing about machines. And we've, of course, heard frequently from the president and his administration an interest in secure hand-marked paper ballots. And if an RFP is issued for a new voting machine, the citizens will request and require an independent forensic auditor to be allowed to test the system in a public system fairly before it's actually purchased. Thank you so very much.
I think that was excellently done. It's something that you and I talked here quite a bit about last session whenever that letter was waived in a committee hearing.
Yeah, and we had to, we had to, do a lot of hard charging in order to even get a copy of the letter. That wasn't even provided to us. It was waived in front of a committee initially, and we had to do a lot of things to finally get a copy of that letter. But it was completely misrepresented, what the letter said. And so clearly the Trump administration, there's no evidence whatsoever that the Trump administration is endorsing her intentions regarding computer-based voting systems in Louisiana. On the contrary, everything that we've heard out of the Trump administration, and Christy Hike reiterated this yesterday, has been just the opposite. And yet they have their head in the sand, and they are not paying any attention, apparently, to what President Trump and the administration and cyber experts throughout the world are saying about this. Another point that Cecile raised, Danielle, is the importance of having an independent, objective, third-party forensic auditor test the reliability of any system that Nancy Landry ends up coming up with or wants for our citizens. And Kyle Ardoin, when he was the Secretary of State, he spoke at the local Republicans Club. This is back in 2 or 3 years ago, when he was trying for the second time to award a contract to Dominion for the machine-based voting system. And he assured the audience, when they specifically asked, that there will be third-party independent auditors of any proposed voting system in Louisiana. Nobody hired by the state of Louisiana, nobody who has a political connection to this industry in any way, shape, or form to come in and do an objective audit to see if this system is reliable. Well, we don't know whether that's going to occur. We don't know if she intends to make that available to the public to view and see while the machine is being tested. We don't know who the auditor would be. And that is not acceptable. And what Cecile said is 100% right. We're not even going to think about accepting this system until and unless there is a public audit of the proposed system where the public is allowed to be present and view it and see it. That is what we need to be. Right now, proprietary systems, Danielle, this is the most absolutely absurd thing you can ever imagine. The only people who are allowed to view and really examine the source codes of these electronic voting systems, no matter which one we get, are the vendors, the manufacturers, the ones who are making millions and millions of dollars off of selling these systems to our state. They're the only ones who have access to the source codes. How do you reconcile that with ensuring that a fundamental right that we have, perhaps the most fundamental right that we have in our state and in our country, the right to be secure in our vote, is assured? You cannot possibly reconcile those two realities.
Was the room filled yesterday, Chris?
A lot of people. I think it was. Yeah, I think
Okay.
it was.
Were any legislators present?
No, not that I saw, other
Okay.
than the two legislators who are actually on the commission.
Who are they? I know
One
one is
is
Comrade.
One is Dustin Miller, and one
Okay.
is Senate Comrade Greg Miller, who apparently failed upward because as a reward for authoring SB 80, which totally crushes the speech of American citizens.
And some other things.
And
There
some
were
other
a couple,
things, of course. Yeah. With regard to being able to conduct exit polls at voting precincts, we're now basically cordoned off 3 football fields from a polling precinct if we want to try to do an exit poll, which is impossible at that distance, while CNN can go in and conduct any kind of exit poll that it wants. And I brought this up yesterday, and I specifically confronted Senator Miller and asked him to repeal this horrible bill. And that's when my mic was cut by the Secretary of State. So,
Imagine that.
but because she said that my query was not relevant. So apparently a query about the extent to which ordinary citizens are allowed to verify the
It wasn't even a
reliability.
query. It wasn't a query. It was a statement and a demand, right?
And it was a statement and a demand because, but what I'm saying is, how do you possibly say that it's irrelevant to the issue of election security? She's trying to say that a new machine-based voting system is accurate, secure, and reliable. Yet a very member of the commission authored a bill that basically blindfolds the right of citizens to verify the accuracy of that system through exit polls. So how is it not relevant? But she said it wasn't relevant, so my mic was cut. And even though I have a loud voice, I continued to talk a little, but the mic was cut, so people couldn't hear me. But the bottom line is this: I don't see how this commission really has a tremendous amount of credibility when Senator Miller is sitting on that commission. How do people have faith in it? I don't think they can.
Yeah. Well, it'll be very interesting to see where this goes, Chris. I mean, the timing of it is just kind of brilliant. I mean, you and I have talked, and this whole commission hearing really was a gift from God because it got on the record very publicly. Citizens disapproval of the purchase of these machines, citizens' concerns, and the reiteration of where we are federally on this as well. And of course, yesterday was also the election in Texas. And there was a huge number of problems across the state of Texas with regard to the elections that were even being reported before yesterday. There were things like what was it? Doc Chambers' name was being left off of certain ballots in certain locations. And I saw as well, I know you'll appreciate this, Jasmine Crockett is saying that there was election fraud. I know that they're saying that. I know we can all guess why she's saying that because she lost to Steve Toth, but it is a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
to
it
to
is.
see people, saying that there's
It is a
election fraud.
beautiful thing. Yeah, it is. And I know that there were problems in Texas. But Danielle, the great silver lining of this meeting yesterday, as I said earlier, was that every facet of the problem that we're facing in Louisiana on elections was covered by
That's
one person or
beautiful.
another. Bert Calais, I believe it was the one who brought up the fact that, and I did as well, brought up the fact that SB 436, which has been on the books now for well over a year, requiring independent verification of U.S. citizenship, it's codifying the constitutional prohibition in Louisiana against non-citizens voting, and it requires independent verification of U.S. citizenship when someone is trying to register to vote. And by the Secretary of State's own admission, that law is not being enforced. That was put on the record directly in front of her as well. And so we have really all, and the great thing about, I guess, the fact that, I mean, what are we to infer by the fact that none of these points that were raised yesterday were met with any kind of a response, any kind of an objection, any kind of request for clarification, any kind of a correction? Absolutely nothing. And so, again, I think a reasonable inference is that what was said was true. And I believe that it was true. So it doesn't help them, the fact that she sat there and offered no rebuttal at any point during the hearing to any of the points that were raised.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you, Chris. There's a couple, there's some activity in the chat here from JCA Kipper. I'm not sure who that is, so maybe they'll let me know. But they said, FYI, the commission is the who against fair elections. It included Gina Gore, who oversaw Katie and Christie getting kicked out of the East Baton Rouge Republican Women's and the LFRW. That's true. Michael Lunsford, who's written hit piece after hit piece. Greg Miller, who gutted attempts to make elections safe and carried the censorship bill. Yeah, that's all. Those are all facts. Those are all facts.
Those are all 100% facts. And one of the points that was raised, Danielle, is that it's been represented publicly that the Voting System Commission, which met a couple of years ago, for months and months and months and months, the hot air that was blown in that room from those commissioners would probably be enough to raise the Capitol off the ground. And yet, ultimately, the recommendation that they made was was hand-marked paper ballots, ballot marking devices, i.e. computers, or a combination of both. So there was no recommendation at all to require or recommend that the Secretary of State use secure hand-marked paper ballots, except for the disabled who are unable to hand mark a ballot. And yet that is exactly what Alex Halderman testified to. He was the internationally renowned cyber expert that was called before the Voting System Commission and specifically said these BMDs are a very attractive target for cyber criminals. They are vulnerable, they're not reliable, and they should not be used except in the case of the disabled when they cannot mark a paper ballot. And yet he was their witness, and yet that was not the recommendation that the Voting System Commission made. They basically gave the Secretary of State a blank check. She can go all BMD, all secure paper ballots, or some kind of a hybrid of the two. And, it was very important to clarify that because there are members of that commission who are trying to state publicly that they did make Halderman's recommendation to the Secretary of State. Absolutely not true. In fact, Kyle Ardoin said at the end of the Voting System Commission, he was on it then, that I don't know what I'm going to come up with yet. We'll see.
Yeah. Also in the chat, Nancy also left out at least 2 people who had prepared testimony. She was ready to get out of there. She probably had a lunch date.
Yeah. Well, she saved me for last, and I didn't realize that there were other people who had requested the opportunity to testify and were not given an opportunity to. But that's concerning also.
Yeah. And Chris, any good meeting, anyone who's ever run a meeting for a business knows that you never leave the meeting without saying what's going to happen next. What are the expectations for the people who attended the meeting? Takeaways. What happened? What was the next steps that were mentioned from the commission?
Nothing, absolutely nothing. And one of the big complaints, again, that citizens have is that it's very, very difficult to know when the public meetings are coming up, what the discussion's going to be, when these computer-based systems are supposedly going to be checked, audited. We don't know anything. I mean, the notice for yesterday itself is a very good example. All it said was presentation. Presentation about what? What specifically are you going to be talking about here? What's the scope of this hearing? We don't know because it goes back to a lack of transparency.
Chris, I can guarantee you if I ever invited my boss or colleagues at Pfizer to a meeting whose title was presentation or whose agenda said presentation, they would every single one of them decline and say, bring me, invite me to a meeting when you have an agenda. I need to know what I'm going.
Exactly. So yet that is the state of things, and that's what we're dealing with. But I think at this point, my understanding from our exceedingly effective grapevine is that elements in the Trump administration are aware of the hearing and are going to be looking at some of the video from yesterday so that they can get a clear understanding of exactly what's going on in our state. So essentially, yesterday was the functional equivalent of what the State of Freedom is doing on broader issues statewide, bypassing the mainstream gatekeepers and trying to get information directly to the people who have the decision-making authority. And I think that was a huge, huge boon for what happened yesterday, because they're going to be able to see some of these things. In other words, they're going to know now that our state is simply not enforcing the citizenship verification in Louisiana, not doing it. And not one oversight hearing, not one question, despite the fact that we've sent emails to the President of the Senate and to the Speaker of the House requesting that they hold an oversight hearing to ask the Secretary of State why the law is not being enforced. And nothing. Crickets.
And so, Chris, I can tell you something. It's not hard. It's not hard, right? The real ID. If you want to get a real ID, which we'll leave to the side whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, they require you bring in a passport or a birth certificate. So if you want to register to vote and you're registering at the DMV, which I have problems with that on its face, but we'll also leave that to the side. The DMV doesn't have any problems sending you out and saying you don't have the right documents. How many times have you been sent out of the DMV because you didn't have the right documents, Chris?
Yeah. It's a lot.
They have no problem doing that. These people will send you out of there if you don't have a bill that's within date or something, right? So there's not a problem. There's not a lack of ability for DMV employees to say, I'm sorry, you don't have the right documentation. You can't register to vote. That's not a hard thing.
No. So there are more restrictions currently imposed on getting a driver's license in Louisiana than in exercising a fundamental right.
Not exactly. Not exactly. If you want just a regular driver's license, I think the bar's lower. But if you want the real ID, which
the real ID.
Yeah.
You've got to show that you're. In other words, what you're saying is there's no reason. By the way, Danielle, when this bill was passed to require independent proof of citizenship when you're registering to vote, it was Secretary of State Landry that requested a 6-month deferment on the effective date of that bill so that she could come up with a mechanism to enforce the law. 6 months. So instead of becoming effective on signature when the bill was passed in May of 2024, it didn't become effective until January of 2025. And here now we are in March of 2026, and the law, by her own admission, is still not being enforced, still on the honor system.
Yeah, and what do we have? We have 24 months now more of illegals on our voter rolls?
Yeah. Probably so. So. And so there absolutely no excuse for this. There's been a incredible failure of oversight on the part of our legislature and the Voting System Commission. And by the way, Dale Clary, who was the only viable member, in my view, of the Voting System Commission, the only one that did not reflexively trot when the institutional bureaucrats say trot, jump when the institutional bureaucrats say jump, was Dale Clary. He asked legitimate questions. He expressed real concerns. And guess who's no longer on the Voting System Commission? Dale
Wow.
Clary.
That's something. That's something. Well, it shows you, right? They're looking for a rubber stamp brigade on this.
A rubber stamp brigade. That's a great word for it.
So, Chris, what should we expect? What should we be doing in the meantime? Because you and I have both poured through over 1,000, 1,200 pieces of legislation, 1,300. I don't know the final count. We've looked at them, at least cursorily, at all of them. I did not see one single bill. And I was getting sleepy, but I think I would have perked up if I'd seen something related to election integrity, at least tangentially. There are election-related bills. There are things that we may be able to do during session with respect to some of the pieces of legislation that are being put forward. But there's no bill like what Senator Hodges brought last year, where she said no components from foreign adversaries in voting equipment because it's critical infrastructure. So if that's the case, what do we need to be doing in terms of citizen engagement on this issue?
There is a bill from Thomas Presley who talked that specifically addresses the issue of foreign components in our information technology systems, which I think is a bill that has real promise. I'm going to look at it more closely and see what needs to be done to make the bill even stronger. But I think that bill has promise. I still have about 200 bills left to go through. So but you're right. So far, I have not seen anything other than that specifically related to the electronic infrastructure in our elections. So my suggestion would be that we continue to do the call to action, which is up on LACAG, continue to make sure that the Secretary of State knows and the governor knows that we're paying attention to this, that we do not want electronic voting systems in our state, and continue to put out on social media as broadly as we can what our positions are on this. I think ultimately, we have to make sure that legislators who are failing us are held accountable. A lot of this is going to come down to the ballot box. A lot of this is going to be cured when some of these Republicans are turned out of office. And the last point is the Trump administration, I think, needs to continue to be made aware of exactly what is going on here in the state of Louisiana, what our Secretary of State is moving toward, and specifically how the position of the Trump administration has been misrepresented here in Louisiana, because clearly on multiple issues, because clearly the president does have jurisdictional authority if in fact there is massive fraud throughout the country as a result of these systems, because elections have been declared critical infrastructure. The president absolutely has a right to take action here and to prohibit electronic-based voting, at least in federal elections. And if he does that, which very well could happen, then we're going to be in a situation here in Louisiana where we invested $150 million initial outlay for an electronic voting system that can only be used in state elections, not in federal elections. So I don't think we want to be in that situation either. And I think that's going to be a political casualty for Nancy Landry as well. But I believe that the public is becoming more and more aware. By the way, Danielle, you realize that a recent Rasmussen poll, and you said you thought it was higher than this.
Yeah, I sent it to you.
Yeah, you sent it to me, said that 60+% of the American people have real problems with electronic voting and would rather
63%.
63%. And you thought it was higher. 70% of the states in the country right now have as their primary method of voting secure hand-marked ballots. And in case of the disabled, they use a BMD if someone is legitimately disabled. 70%. And
What do you mean, Chris? We know that 70% of the states are not using hand-marked paper ballots. What do you mean?
Well, according to what Dr. Russ said, and according to what I've seen, the primary method of voting in 70% of the states in the country is hand-marked ballots. And that you fill in with an oval and then run through an optical scanner. That's my understanding is what's occurring. That's not what Nancy Landry is recommending for Louisiana. She's recommending BMDs as the primary method of voting in the state of Louisiana, which everybody knows is not reliable. So I said yesterday, Secretary Landry, one of the requirements of the Voting System Commission in trying to procure a new system is to engage in talks to look and see what other states are doing. So I said, I assume there will be some written communications between members of the Voting System Commission and other states exploring what other states do regarding their elections. And of course, I got no response to that. But we're going to do a public records request and ask for any and all communications between the Voting System Commission and the leaders of other states regarding how they handle their elections, because that will tell us whether Nancy Landry has been completely foreclosed all along to the possibility of doing anything else, or whether she has seriously considered other options. If there's bound to be some written communications, right?
Well, whenever you started talking about that, Chris, all I could hear was that song echoing in my ears. You can go your own way. She's going her own way.
Yes. I mean, it looks like that, but we'll see based on the public records request what exactly her level of engagement has been with other states, because that's the responsibility of the Voting System Commission. I don't know that they have even casually considered, Danielle, a secure hand-marked paper ballot system. They certainly haven't asked Bruce O'Dell or anyone else who has headed up the start to finish how you do a secure hand-marked vote count. I don't think that she's reached out at all to anybody who disagrees with her agenda on this. And we'll see what the public
unless required by statute.
Right, unless it's required by statute. So, but I believe that the public is becoming more and more aware in Louisiana. I believe it's becoming more and more of an issue here. We have to keep up the drumbeat. We have to keep the pressure on. I believe at this point, in light of all the evidence that's out there, if she goes forward and invests this massive amount of our money in a system that is acutely vulnerable to fraud and manipulation, it's not really a matter of administrative discretion at this point. It's a matter of self-implication. There's no more plausible deniability. None.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what the next couple of days and even weeks on what unfolds, especially with regard to the Texas elections, because I think that timing is pretty fantastic. I think they're going to have to look into some of those races. And I wish I had had time to take a look and see what was being said about the Abbott race. But you can't tell me that he just won outright. I mean, if you've met a Texan, they don't like him.
Well, exactly. It seems very odd and very suspicious.
Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. There's someone in the chat here saying, thanks. It's Ms. Parker. Thanks for sharing such important voting information. Paper ballots only, no machines, period. It's the taxpayers' money. It's very interesting, Ms. Parker, how the government officials, the quote unquote elected officials, seem to think it's their money. It's government money whenever they get, when they get in there. It's not taxpayers' money.
Yeah. Great reminder, Ms. Parker.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, do you want to turn to a topic now that's going to take up a great deal of airtime this session, carbon capture?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well,
stuff.
A lot of hot air.
Yeah.
So before we get to the bills, you mentioned that this carbon capture and sequestration was a topic of conversation by legislative leadership earlier this week and at the Baton Rouge Press Club. And they were not too keen to hear that people were trying to move against, I guess, their big plan of making Louisiana the dumping ground for the whole country.
Yeah. Baton Rouge Press Club, Monday, Senate President Cameron Henry, who I believe is termed out now, so apparently he is able to make such ridiculous statements with impunity. But he said that there's no reason why 5 people who were protesting carbon capture and sequestration in Louisiana should be allowed to hold up a process that will change the face of Louisiana.
It will change the
Five,
face of Louisiana. He's got that much right.
well, he's got that right. 5 people, Danielle. It's extraordinary to me the cognitive dissonance with that statement. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of ordinary Louisiana citizens throughout the state who are having town halls, who are protesting,
It's
who are.
insulting.
It's absolutely insulting that he would make such a statement. And it's important that citizens in Louisiana know that he made that statement. It should motivate you to continue to contact your legislator and to continue to demand that they do what is necessary this session to roll this back. And there are a number
Chris,
of bills on that front.
I have a suggestion. Can we make the calls to action on all of these not only go to the individual legislators, but also go to Cameron Henry and Philip DeVilliers?
Absolutely, we can change that. We can change it to send it straight to the speaker and to the president and to every legislator, for that matter, and also to the governor. And I think that's what it should be. Danielle, this is going to be a hard fight this session. There are some very good bills that, if passed and signed, will virtually end carbon capture and sequestration in Louisiana, at least insofar as eminent domain goes.
Chris,
Some good bills.
one quick question before we get into that. You mentioned sending it to Governor Landry. At what stage, under what circumstances would the Attorney General get involved in something like this? You know, the people are wanting to shut this down. The localities are hiding things from the people. What, you know, at some point, does she get called in because of these non-disclosure agreements that have been happening? Yesterday, William Most said that there are hundreds of non-disclosure agreements between localities and these carbon, not just carbon capture companies, but also the data center companies.
Right now, the Attorney General, if I'm not mistaken, is actually a defendant in a lawsuit in the 19th JDC that was filed by Save My Louisiana, arguing that the current law in Louisiana on carbon capture and sequestration and eminent domain and all the rest of it is unconstitutional. So I believe that she has to argue for the constitutionality of it now that a lawsuit has been filed. You know, someone could send a request and ask her for an advisory opinion on the constitutionality of carbon capture and sequestration. But in light of her current legal posture, I'm confident that would not be forthcoming. So that's when she would like, you know, so I think that at this point,
but could she render an opinion on the legality of companies signing or coercing non-disclosure agreements for highly technical industrial projects with localities, when we know this is one thing that I mentioned with William Most yesterday. One of the biggest problems with those non-disclosure agreements is these local parish officials, nothing against them, they can't know everything. They're not experts in you know, class 4 injection wells and pipeline building. They, you know, there are other members of their community who probably are. And so
yes.
Not only keeping the non-disclosure agreements are not only sinister for, you know, on their face, but they're also creating a vacuum where there's not enough information even given to the quote unquote decision makers. So can we request an opinion for the legality of those non-disclosure agreements in any case?
She can and she should, if someone requested an advisory opinion on it. but I do not believe that it will probably be forthcoming. But you raise an interesting point, Danielle. These NDAs, where these local governments are entering into these agreements involving massive amounts of our monies, some relating to carbon capture and sequestration, and squeezing the public out from knowing the details of these agreements. That is the very reason why legislation that's pending, that will be heard in this session, legislation that would allow local municipalities to make the decision on carbon capture and sequestration individually rather than a uniform law. While that is not good enough, because local governments can be just as corrupt as state governments can be. So any amendment, and I hope legislators understand this, any bill that will allow or permit local municipalities to make this decision on CCS should be specifically mandated that the vote be parish-wide referendum, where the people are directly voting on the issue, and it's not in the hands of local government bodies. Fortunately, there are a lot of good local government bodies, and quite a few of them at this point have passed ordinances or resolutions opposing and prohibiting CCS in their parishes. But that's not all of them. There are a number of parishes who are participating in these NDAs, these local governments participating in these NDAs. So they're not really on the side of the local population. And so that's why these bills need to be amended to require a parish-wide vote directly from the people on these bills. And if that occurs, then LeCag will support those bills. But if it does not occur, then we're gonna be very, very clear what our reservation is about them as they're currently worded, because there are a lot of them. A number of legislators have brought bills to confer authority on the locales, but there's not one that I've seen yet that mandates a parish-wide vote of the people. Because guess what, Danielle? If there was a parish-wide vote of the people on this issue, there's not one parish in Louisiana that would have a majority of people who vote to put this garbage in their parish. I don't believe there would be one.
Well, as long as the voting system was not corrupt. So we've got to work on all on all fronts here, obviously. But Chris, I think this is a great discussion because it seems like someone needs to bring suit against that law that was passed last year or the year before that you and I were scratching our heads about, that allowed for localities to get into non-disclosure agreements with that were related specifically to economic development. I think that needs to be challenged in court.
Absolutely needs to be challenged. That was the bill. It was brought by a Democrat. It might have been Kyle Green. I can't remember exactly who brought it.
I don't know.
But the bill passed and then failed in the Senate. And then there was a revote in the Senate, and they managed to get just enough votes to get that passed. And that bill essentially allows municipalities to negotiate with private industry and conceal for a year, 2 years, 3 years, the details of those agreements from the public. You're exactly right. We raised a lot of hell about that. And again, it failed the first time on the Senate, and then they had a revote on it, and it barely passed. And of course, it was signed by the governor. But I agree with you. That law in and of itself needs to be repealed.
Yeah. And another thought, Chris, is that could localities pass their own rule that says, like a municipality, if a parish president or mayor or police jury or parish council wants to get into an agreement, they must first announce that they are considering entering into a non-disclosure agreement with X company.
There's a great bill, it might be Chuck Owen that's bringing it, that specifically requires advance notice of any public hearing at which these types of agreements are going to be discussed. I'm going to go back and look at it again. Again, we're just in the process of going through all the bills, discarding the trash, finding the ones that are important. We're going to come out with specific short descriptions, as you know, Danielle. We'll be putting a lot of time in that today, from what I hear, and then come out with
Good thing it's a rainy day. We're
Yeah,
going to be trapped inside.
Exactly. But there's a very good bill that addresses that issue. Chuck Owen has a number of very good bills this session. He seems to be ahead of the game on a number of these issues,
Yeah.
and it was great going through these bills to see it. But there's one that addresses that, and I
Okay.
couldn't agree with you more. Advance notice, where the municipality says we're considering entering a non-disclosure agreement, and give the public an opportunity to ask, what is it about? What does it entail? And let them at least weigh in on it,
Yeah.
and not just completely blindfold them, as many of them are doing right now, and as William Most addressed on the State of Freedom yesterday.
Yeah, a couple chats here, Chris. One from Sarah on Facebook. She says, up north, we have no one who will take on our parish officials who have harmed so many people in so many ways. What parish are you in, Sarah? Maybe we need to put you in touch with some people we know. Not saying we do, definitely, but there may be a good chance that we know some people who are active where you are. And then also in the Rumble chat, a headman says, our elected leaders have never been educated on what it means to be an elected official under the 51 constitutions that govern our nation. They are the trustee and we are the beneficiary. Well,
You know, excellent point, and I do want to the first Sarah. I would like to know if she could refer specifically to what she's talking about, and see what we might be able to do to help there. And also on the second one, you're exactly right. The second chat, I don't know that our elected officials do not understand what their responsibility is. They are just unwilling to exercise that responsibility. And you know, a big part of this would be solved if our legislature, if the legislative branch of our government, our elected officials in the legislative branch, exercised the vigorous type of oversight over the executive branch that it should be doing. Right now, our executive branch is running amok with little or no accountability, from the governor to the secretary of state to other executive agencies. And, you know, that's not a healthy functioning system.
yeah.
Our legislature does not act like a co-equal branch of government. It acts like the redheaded stepchild that's lucky to get a peanut butter sandwich for dinner.
Well, and to be fair, Chris, it was established that way. It was totally set up that way, right? I mean, if you talk to Paul Hurd, he'll tell you in a heartbeat that there are some changes, some structural changes that need to be made to so that there can't be so much retaliatory opportunity for the governor against people in the legislature who stand up to him.
Yeah, to your point, one of the things that Cameron Henry said Monday at the press club, these parishes can't come to the state and say, hey, look, we need money for roads, we need money for bridges. Well, they're cutting off money right now by opposing carbon capture sequestration. What is he essentially saying? He's essentially saying, if you have legislators who go in there this session and fight hard against this CCS scam, that they're going to be punished by not getting funding for their own critical infrastructure in their parishes. That goes to the heart of the structural problem in our system. Many
You know what else
legislators
he's
are
saying?
afraid to act.
You know what else he's saying? I have no clue where this money comes from. It just shows up and I get to hand it out wherever I want to.
Exactly. It's
Come
our
on.
money, Cameron. It's our money, Cameron. So essentially, that's what they're saying. There's this inherent retaliatory feature to the way that our system is set up, and so that really does have to change. There's no question about it.
Yeah, and it seems to me, Chris, and legislators can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that the governor gets to anoint the leader and the Senate president and the Speaker of the House as well, right? To drive his agenda, which that's not the way a free society works. That's not the way our Republican form of government was set up.
Absolutely not. Obviously, the governor of any state has significant political power, but he absolutely should not be able, he should have neither the authority nor the inclination to strong arm the legislature in order to advance his agenda and to punish people who stand against that agenda for very legitimate reasons. And that's what's occurring, unfortunately. So that's a veiled threat, Cameron
Yeah.
Henry. That's a veiled threat that if you come in here and you kill carbon capture in Louisiana, you're going to pay a heavy price for it. I think it's sad. I think it's despicable. And the citizens of Louisiana know what is going on. I've always said, Danielle, from the beginning of this, that the most, in your view, the second most consequential policy issue of our generation in Louisiana is this carbon capture and sequestration, because it deals with large amounts of our money, it deals with stripping us of our private property rights, and it deals with direct threats to our public health. That one issue of carbon capture and sequestration, it's that important. And that's why this fight is going to be very, very, it could get bitter in this session. Because legislators are going to have to choose where they stand. There's something in the scripture, Danielle, that says, choose this day where you stand. And I
Who
would
you
call
will
on
serve.
legislators.
Who you will serve.
Choose this day. Yes, choose this day whom you will serve. And that's a question that every one of them should be asking themselves right about now.
Yeah. Well, it is going to get sticky because I tell you what, if we don't kill carbon capture, the people of Louisiana are going to pay a heck of a lot more than if we do.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I don't even think that they are so blinded by money, many of them, and self-enrichment, that they really are not seeing the long-term protracted consequences of this. By the way, Danielle, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
This is an intellectual question for you. If the EPA has come out in the last several weeks, Lee Zeldin, and specifically repealed the Obama era finding that CO2 is harmful to the environment in natural form, harmful to human life and human existence, that has been explicitly repealed, hasn't the entire predicate for carbon capture and sequestration been eviscerated? Why would we still be pursuing this in light of that finding?
It's because of the curtain of money. It's just a whole big curtain that's made out of money. And that's why we're still pursuing it, Chris.
But it makes even less sense than it did before, because the whole predicate going back to in 2020 when CCS when carbon capture and sequestration was legalized in Louisiana in eminent domain, the whole predicate for it was climate change, and we have to have this for the environment. It is in the best public interest of Louisiana citizens to have CCS for the environment. Well, it's all collapsed now, according to Lee Zeldin and the EPA, and yet they're still pursuing this. They don't even have a plausible facial justification for this anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I disagree with you in that there was one to begin with, right? Because there wasn't. Let's be honest. Do you think that a lot of the legislators who voted for this don't even believe in climate change? So the predicate is ridiculous to start with.
Didn't you say, Danielle, didn't you mention earlier pre-show that there was a bill from, I believe it's Brett Guyman, that will, it really is a prohibition against the implementation of anything for the ostensible purpose of reducing greenhouse emissions. And you're saying that it should go a step forward and specifically state that CO2 in natural form, consistent with the EPA regulation and repeal, is not a harm to the environment. It's not a harm to public health or to citizens. I think that bill should be amended to explicitly include that language.
I think so too. And if Brett Guyman wants to be serious about getting rid of carbon capture in this state and about promoting or I don't know, just being permissive of perverse incentives that are driving it, then he should absolutely include that as an amendment. and to be fair, we haven't had that conversation. He's been very open to things we've suggested in the past.
Yeah,
So I'm not suggesting
has.
that he wouldn't, but that's just my point. There's a huge gaping hole of an opportunity there. And maybe he was addressing something slightly tangential to that, so he didn't see it, but we'll be very happy to mention it to him.
Yeah, and once we're done with our summaries and our recommendations, Danielle, then we're going to make sure that these legislators know what we're about. By the way, Danielle, slightly different topic here, but when I testified in front of the Cybersecurity Task Force several weeks ago, we followed up with several recommendations regarding securing our infrastructure against foreign threats, regarding legislation. And there are a couple of items of legislation that are addressing the issues that we raised, one of which is that Valerie Hodges is bringing once again her bill to allow expropriation of property if it's owned by a foreign adversary within
a trimmed
50
down
miles.
version, more just
Yeah.
single issue bill.
Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with the security of the elections. Exactly. It simply deals with the right of our state to expropriate property within 50 miles of critical infrastructure
Yeah,
if
that's
it
going to
is
be
determined. Yeah.
And that'll be a big topic this session, I believe, as well, Chris.
Huge.
There's several bills that are dealing with foreign adversaries, so that'll be a very interesting conversation.
Yes, and Comrade Senator Greg Miller, you recall, in Jude is the one who led the charge to defeat that last session. And so hopefully there'll be a different climate. That's a very important piece of legislation.
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer for citizens across the state. Why there should even be major debate on that issue in the legislature stuns me.
Yeah. And Chris, we have a couple chats here that I've missed. One is from Grumpy Old Man. He says, it seems there's a case for an ethics case against these legislators. That's the understatement of the century.
Oh, absolutely. What a great point. Speaking, Danielle, and again, I know we're a little bit off topic, but speaking of ethics cases, there's a bill that was filed. I almost fell off of my chair when I read this, even in Louisiana. It's a bill brought by Kyle Green that will strip away what protections exist in Louisiana against politicians, legislators, the governor being able to receive campaign cash or money during and shortly after a legislative session. It's absolutely unbelievable. If this bill passes, there will be virtually no guardrails between money and these politicians, even in the heart of a legislative session when they're in the process of voting on critical issues. Yeah. Even 60 days after, when the governor is in the process of figuring out whether he's going to sign or veto a bill, money can be coming in right at that moment.
It's just naked corruption. It's completely naked corruption at this point.
Absolutely unbelievable. It's going before it'll go before maybe the Government Affairs Committee or Commerce. I'm not sure, but there's not a Republican in the legislature that should vote for that bill. It should die in the first committee.
Yeah. Well, we have a track record there, Chris, and a lot of these bills that someone in the governor's mansion wants to see move will move. So we'll see if Kyle Green thought that up on his own or if it came from another source. The other bill I wanted to mention related to ethics was, I believe, Timmy Chasson, I saw yesterday. He brought one that will reduce fines for campaign ethics violations.
Yeah, we're in the process of looking at that. Is that the bill? I don't think that's the same bill that that just reduces the fees, like for a late filing, or if you,
it might be
350 to 250, because I think that bill is because there are a lot of small advocacy groups that have PACs and so forth.
Yeah.
And I think that that's probably a good thing, but I'll look at the bill that you're talking about. It may be higher in the list and see where we are. There's another bill, Danielle, that would allow immediate family members of boards and commissions where their family member is on the board or commission. Okay.
Yeah.
And the family member, not the board member, is employed by an employer that has a business, contractual, or financial relationship with the board, and the board member would not be required to disclose that to the board.
Yeah. This legislature wants to legalize corruption.
I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary. So we're going to be just pushing hard against some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Because
and to be fair, I don't want to say this legislature. It's at least the author has to wear that badge, because why bring it if you don't believe in it? The rest of the votes remain to be seen.
Exactly. And there's some good bills, Danielle, too,
Yeah.
that we're very, very stoked about as well, that we're going to be following also.
Yeah.
But it's and as you said a minute ago, it's interesting. We'll find out one way or the other who's actually, the force that's actually behind some of these bills, because it's not always the original idea of the author, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's true. And we'll be talking about plenty of bills tomorrow as we come back here 10 o'clock for the start of our preview. There's so many bills. I think over 1,400 bills, Chris. Is that right?
1,400 bills. Wow.
Something like that.
Fortunately, Danielle, a number of them, believe me, not really putting that much of a dent in the overall figure, but a number of them are naming a bridge after somebody. And quite frankly,
there's a lot of prestige license plates.
A lot of prestige license plates, and a number even on substantive issues have duplicates, throughout, where a number of legislators are essentially bringing the exact same bill, and specifically, but not only related to carbon capture. It's as though, and what I draw from that, Danielle, on the issue of carbon capture is that all of the legislators who are getting heat from their constituents, and it's increasing throughout the state, they want to be able to stand up and say that they sponsored legislation that'll protect the citizens, that'll help roll back this menace in our state. Everybody wants to be on board because they know that the headlamp of an onrushing freight train is bearing down on them, and they want to have some protection against that when it comes time for re-election. That's what I believe. I don't think many of them would be doing this at all if it were not for the kind of overwhelming grassroots pressure on this issue that's currently being placed on them.
It's true. And I'll also say, Chris, a lot of people are waking up in the legislature to what this really means. It's one thing to listen to the lobbyists tell you what it means, and it's all rainbows and daisies. And then when your constituents come and say, are you trying to poison my kids and kill all my plants and run me out of the state? They're like, wait a second, I really thought it was something else.
Well, exactly. Yes. And, I didn't really understand the bill. You know how many bills we have to read. And you know what our policy is, Danielle? And we've said it before. If you don't know what a bill says, vote against it. If you do not know what a bill does, vote against it. I think it's recklessly irresponsible to vote for something, the implications of which you don't know because you haven't read the bill. I think that's a very simple policy that every legislator should follow. If I don't know what the bill says, I'm voting against it, period.
Well, and Colonel Mark Guillory corrected me when I proposed that, and he said, if it's going to take away your liberties, then they need to vote against it. If it is going to add liberties, then they need to vote for it. So there's a little color there.
But my point is, they wouldn't know whether it's going to do one of those two things if they haven't read the bill. What I'm saying is, if you don't know what a bill does or does not do, you need to vote against it. And I think that perhaps a number of them legitimately say, I didn't really know what I was voting for on the carbon capture and sequestration. I didn't understand it. And that's probably true. I just don't believe that going forward, at least, that's ever going to be a legitimate excuse again. I think that this is something that should teach people some very valuable lessons on how to conduct themselves in the legislature when it comes to these votes. I mean, it's just important, and it's really not too much to ask.
Yeah. Well, I know that the legislators have a tough job, and we here want to make that job easier where we can. So we're sharing our priorities, and we're going to back up good legislation. We're going to back up legislators who are doing the right thing by their constituents. And we don't want anybody to feel any other way, because Chris, you say it time and time again, we are here for the citizens of the people. We're a mouthpiece for the people. We're not here with some corporate agenda, or and we're also not here with an axe to grind. We want the people who are elected to represent the people to go to Baton Rouge and represent the best interests of the people, not the best interests of themselves, not the best interests of their lobbyists, friends, not the best interest of their peers, right? Because that becomes a thing. A lot of times it seems the legislature gets into session and suddenly it's groupthink over there, or they feel like they need to support and protect each other, when really that's not the case. They need to support and protect their constituents.
Yes. And I understand, Danielle, that there has to be some marginal degree of flexibility.
Yeah.
Like Jay Galley said when we had a meeting, and Jay Galley is a very good representative. He said, Chris, and I brought up a couple of bills. And he said, Chris, I shouldn't have voted for that. I agree that it was a bad bill. If I could do it over again, I wouldn't vote for it. I believed him when he said that. But then he went on to make the broader point that there are times when there is some horse trading that has to go on in the
Yeah.
legislature. And I understand that, and we're not naive to that. It's important at times to do that, but not when it comes to issues of profound fundamental freedom to
Yeah.
Louisiana citizens, not when it comes to issues that directly and profoundly affect Louisiana citizens across the state. That's not a venue for horse trading. That is a venue for standing up and protecting the citizens of this state. And so we have to be able to make those critical distinctions.
Yeah. One last comment in the chat. Why are they still dimming the sun? This is an excellent point. The chemtrails bill, the geoengineering and weather modification bill that got passed last session, Chris, that Senator Facey brought, that didn't have a ton of enforcement mechanism behind it, doesn't seem to have netted us anything.
Yeah, and the bill that I think had much more teeth in it, including much more administrative and I believe even criminal penalties. Kim Coates' bill was killed on the House floor, but Senator Facey's bill made it through. And it is, and I don't think it's a terrible bill, but there's not the kind of teeth in it or the enforcement mechanism or the penalties in it that make it a truly credible piece of legislation, I don't think.
Yeah, and someone sent to the State of Freedom on Facebook through Facebook Messenger a request that we put out a notice to the legislators to make some specific changes to the bill going forward so that it would actually have more meaning and they would stop spraying in Louisiana. Unfortunately, I don't think, Chris, from my reading of the bills, at least, cursory reading, that there are even any bills that address this. We'll have to take a second look, but I didn't see any on my first swipe.
Yeah, and we're going to again. I have 200 bills left to look at, and we'll see for sure whether or not we're supposed to be done today with our synopsis, Danielle. And at that point, we will be making very specific requests on amendments. Because keep in mind, Danielle, while you can't file a bill formally after a certain deadline, you can certainly amend pieces of legislation
Yeah.
to add things that are germane. And there's almost nothing. These bills that we've looked at cover such a broad swath of issues that it's highly likely that any issue that we think needs to be clarified or that needs to be put into law can be added to one of these existing bills in one form or another by way of an amendment. And
Yeah.
so that's very important that we keep that in mind also.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Chris, in terms of announcements, just a reminder to everybody, we'll be back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. and we will attempt to do some kind of preview of session. Like we said, I think it's 1,360 something bills in total. So, trying to create a synopsis of even the useful ones or the ones that we want to watch will be a very daunting task, but we'll just try and hit some of the highlights, and we'll catch a lot of these bills as they get moved through committee. So you'll want to tune in tomorrow. And the legislative session kicks off on Monday, and it goes all the way to June 1st. So we are in for an intense couple of months here.
Yes. And at the start of the session, Danielle, it's always worth remembering people who may be discouraged, people who may be demoralized in some way, whether it is self-imposed or whether it really is imposed from without because of difficult circumstances, either in the state, in the country, or even in your personal life. Just remember in Invictus, we are unconquerable in Christ. We cannot be conquered. He's already won the battle. You know, there's a great poem by Henley is his name. He's a poet. He was a 19th century British poet, and the poem is called Invictus. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank the God, and I'm paraphrasing it a little bit. I thank the God I know to be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of fate, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of Christ's shade. And under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. And then the last lines, it matters not how straight the gate. In other words, it matters not how hard it may be, or how difficult things may be. Christ is the master of my fate. Christ is the captain of my soul. And I think it's so beautiful to remember that going into this session, to remember that we are unconquerable. All we have to do is what God is asking us to do in the process and let him handle the results because he's always faithful.
Yeah, absolutely. That's beautiful, Chris. Just a funny here in the chat by Jim. Hi, Jim. Good to see you. Great job on your testimony yesterday.
Jim Crumling did a super job.
Do you see what he said, Chris? He said, your mic didn't get cut out by Danielle. Haha.
Brother Jim.
That's funny. That's funny. Just a reminder as well, if you are watching and you are not yet signed up for the action alerts for calls to action at lacag.org, I encourage you to please go to lacag.org and do that. Support LACAG as well. We want to make sure that Chris has everything he needs to be effective this session. Support the State of Freedom through freedomstate.us. We want to be in a position to continue to grow, to continue to build, to have our voice expand and our impact be felt even greater. So we can't say how much we appreciate you enough. We're just so blessed to be able to be in a position to bring the truth to you. And we're honored that you would spend some time with us.
Absolutely. And if you're listening today, share the State of Freedom with your friends everywhere, your family everywhere, so that we continue to expand and we continue to be the portal of freedom throughout the state of Louisiana. One loyalty, and that's to the Constitution, two loyalties, to the Constitution and to Louisiana citizens. So let's continue to expand, continue to grow. And Danielle, ultimately, we're going to win.
Yeah, that's right, Chris. That's right. We're moving from victory to victory.
God bless you.
God bless you, Chris.
Fuego, it's just unbelievable. Whether it's the flame-grilled carne asada or a signature mango margarita. I had one of those too. They're serving up a literal feast of freedom at Calle Fuego. It's just extraordinary. I love the owners, Andres and Jose. They run such a great restaurant. The service is extraordinary. The atmosphere is great. So if you're in Pineville and the Alexandria area or passing through, or if you live there, go to Calle Fuego and tell them the State of Freedom sent you. Blanco Brothers has been in business in Louisiana for about 30 years now. I have personal experience with this company, and I know others who have as well. If you have a business or a home and you've got roofing, gutter, sheet metal issues at all, one number you need to know, and that's Blanco Brothers Construction. He will treat you right financially, and he will take very good care of you with regard to the quality of the service that he provides. I cannot recommend Blanco Brothers Construction more highly enough. Memorize the number 225-226 4222. Blanco Brothers Construction, the very best in the business.
Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Any follow-up actions, resources, and links to our sponsors will be in the show notes. All calls to action can be taken at lacag.org. That's LACAG.org.
To learn more about our work, become a monthly subscriber, supporter, or advertiser at freedomstate.us. The State of Freedom, the #1 conservative podcast in Louisiana.